If you follow the steps that I outline in this video, you can use ChatGPT to conduct high-quality thematic analysis that is perfectly ethical. Ethical because you're controlling the bias, you're constantly involved in the process. So that's very important, and you're not allowing ChatGPT to take its usual shortcuts, which is something we'll be doing. We'll be monitoring and not letting ChatGPT take the shortcuts. And the results of this analysis are considered trustworthy and valid as well, because we are transparent throughout the whole process. We'll be again controlling the bias, and the transparency will be achieved by our involving Microsoft Word in addition to working with ChatGPT. So how do you do it? How do you achieve this, and how to start, how to use ChatGPT for thematic analysis? So if you've been following me for some time or watching my other videos, you know that I usually explain the whole process of thematic analysis in 3 simple stages. So regardless if you're using some sort of a framework from the literature, that's absolutely fine. It can still be explained in 3 stages, where the first stage is basically creating this foundation for the subsequent stages. So this is the most important stage. We're creating initial descriptive codes, which are the foundation for everything else that follows. So again, it's very important that you at least watch the previous videos where I explain the process if you want to be able to implement what I'm teaching in this video. Also, I just released this short ebook in which I go through the process of thematic analysis in general and explain what it is, and then explain how to use ChatGPT for this purpose, and I share all the prompts that you can copy and paste as well in that ebook. I really feel like I've given the best advice I have ever given to my students through hundreds of hours of interacting with them in that ebook. So I really gathered everything and compiled all that advice in this short book. And the best part of it is its price. So just have a look. I really think it's probably makes sense to buy it, but don't worry if you don't. I'm still gonna give you all that value in this video, so just follow closely what I'm about to show you. So back to our 3 stages. So the first stage is to create these very detailed descriptive codes. Again, have a look at other videos where I really explained what this means. And then phase 2 is basically refining these codes and organizing them a little bit to see what we actually have in the data, because as I explained very often in all these different videos, thematic analysis is essentially about understanding our data so well that we can decide what themes we can use to communicate the findings. So to make sure that our reader or our audience understands just as much about our data as we do. So that's so stage 2 is refining these codes, and stage 3 is looking at these codes and deciding what the themes will be. So as I said, the foundation of this are the initial codes. Is literally the most important aspect, is the crucial part, to create a list of codes that are detailed, they're descriptive, they're helping us understand the data, and most importantly, we do have lots of codes at this stage. So that's also the most challenging part in using ChatGPT. Like I said, it loves its shortcuts, and it's really inclined to just give us the final product. So you definitely don't want to ask it, for example, to analyze the transcripts thematically, because it's just going to give you the final output. This does not help us with what I said at the beginning, with being ethical, with being transparent, so minimizing the bias and making sure that the findings are valid, because this way we would only be able to show somebody the final result, which is not what should happen. We need to be able to demonstrate the whole process and be transparent. So in order to make sure that it does not take the shortcuts, we should not and must not take the shortcuts ourselves. Which means, for example, that if you're using ChatGPT Plus, which does give you this nice option of uploading the documents, which I'm using, I would still argue that it's best to upload one document at a time, and every time use the same prompt that I'm about to give you. So rather than, for example, uploading everything, because I just don't feel like, I feel like the more data there is, the more files there are, the more likely it is that ChatGPT kind of gets confused. So let's stick to one file at a time. If you don't have ChatGPT Plus and you're just using the free version, that's absolutely fine, except that you have to paste the prompt and paste the transcript into the chat and into that dialog box that you can see in ChatGPT. So you have to paste it there. If the transcript is too long, you have to probably break it into a couple of different parts. So this, of course, may be a little bit more time consuming, but it is possible to achieve that as well. So the initial prompt is the most important one. Remember, don't worry, because you can, and you probably will, and you should definitely adjust the outputs and the results. So as many times flexibly as you want. So even if whenever you're not happy with what it gives you, you'll be constantly asking for adjustments, and that's fine. But let's start with this prompt. It has to be detailed. So what I usually do, I explain what I'm about to upload, or what I uploaded or pasted into the chat. So I say, this is a transcript from a study, for example, exploring teachers' experiences of remote work. So basically, it needs to understand the context and what I'm given it. At the same time, however, we want to maintain balance. So this is something I talk about in that ebook that I mentioned, but I'll quickly explain it here as well. So we want to maintain balance, by which I mean that we don't want to, in my opinion, it's best not to share our research questions, not to share the research questions, not to share the exact aims of the study. Because then again, what ChatGPT will do, again, it will try to, it basically tends to try to take that shortcut again and develop the theme straight away. So if I say I'm interested in challenges that teachers face, let's say, and ways to overcome challenges and something else, then it will be focusing strongly on these elements. I don't want it to be influenced, so I'm not disclosing that information. I'm just saying it's a transcript from teacher interview about the experiences of remote teaching. And then I'm explaining what I want from it. So I'm explaining that I want so ChatGPT, to code this transcript. I explain that codes are units of analysis, and I explain what a perfect code is like. So basically I say I want the codes to be little descriptions, I want them to be descriptive, and I don't want them to be abstract. I can even give it an example. So I may say that I would rather have a code that says, for example, let's say skills are important in being a good teacher, rather than skill set, or professional skill set or something like that. Because in the latter, what happens is that it won't, in the process later of refining the codes, it won't really help me in understanding what exactly was said under this code. So I want it to be really descriptive. So literally these codes, they are little descriptions of what's happening. So I will give ChatGPT this example to just this or some other example to show what a good code is, basically what I want from it. And then most importantly, I will make a couple of other points. I will explain that I want it to list all these codes. I want lots of codes, and most likely, don't worry, because most likely it won't give you this exact output. You probably have to repeat it again, but I say I want everything to be coded. I want a code for everything in that data. Again, if you don't say that, if you don't do that, it will probably give you a handful of something that resembles themes. Again, something pretty abstract, and just there is just a handful. I'll say I want lots of codes. I want everything to be covered with a code. Another thing I say, and this is again very important, is that I want a full list of quotes associated with each code. So again, what's the use? There would be no use of having a list of codes if you don't know what was coded under each code, because later, as we work on the codes and we refine them in stage 2 and then think about the themes, and then we want to report them in the report or chapter, possibly giving some nice examples from the data, we won't know where this comes from if we just have a list of something that looks like themes. So it's very important that you say, I want a full list of quotes associated with each code. So basically what you coded, I want to see it. I want to see a list of it. And we do this for basically for each transcript at the beginning, but definitely for the first transcript. So let's just take stage by stage and step by step. So the first transcript, we do that prompt, we upload or paste the transcript, press enter. Like I said, it's likely that it will experiment with different designs, and you may ask it to redo it. Sometimes it gives us, in addition to these codes, which tend to be pretty good if you're detailed in your instruction, it will still kind of give us these broad names of categories of codes. So something like almost like focus coding, something we want to do later manually when we organize the codes into groups. So you can either just ignore it or just ask it to remove these headings. So there are lots of things that may happen, but you have to just monitor it, and you have to understand exactly what you want from that first stage. So that's what I said initially. You have to know exactly what you need so that you can monitor the performance by ChatGPT. So now you've done the first transcript, and immediately following that output that you're happy with, What I also suggest is give it another prompt and say, now I want the same thing but without the quotes, just the list of codes. And this will make it easier for us later because, as you will see shortly, we'll be moving that to Microsoft Word to different files. So we do want to be able to attribute each quote to each code, but also just to make it quicker and easier, we also want just the list of codes. Also, I just want to note that what happens following this initial generation of codes will also depend on what output you're happy with and basically what you're aiming for and maybe what context you're operating with in. So if you're a student, if you're just in the industry and you're not bothered with the whole process and transparency, it will make a difference because you can, for example, ask ChatGPT following the initial generation of the list of initial codes and then going through the same process for other transcripts. You could ask ChatGPT to take them all and come up with some sort of grouping, which is basically our phase 2 or our focus coding stage. And then you can even ask it to, based on these groups, to come up with some themes. So you could do that, but I won't be going into that in this video because remember, we want to be transparent, we want to be ethical, and we want our findings to be valid. So in this scenario, we do want to have autonomy and control over our data. So you don't want to hand it over to ChatGPT completely. If you're struggling with your research study, remember that there are many ways in which I can support you. I offer, for example, a variety of private tutorials during which I can support you at different stages of your study. We can plan your research questions and research design, for example, review your research proposal, or review what you have already done in your study. I can also guide you through your analysis or answer any question about your study or research in general. I can also analyze your data for you and provide a high quality report of the findings. I can guide you through using different AI tools for your research, as well as offer a variety of other forms of support. So feel free to have a look at my website and the different services that I provide and reach out if you have any questions. So what we want to do now is start involving Microsoft Word, or maybe some other software that you're using that makes it easier for you to organize things. Maybe Excel, I see lots of you using Excel, or maybe some other things, like there are some platforms for brainstorming and organizing work. The point is you need somewhere external where you can copy and paste things to. And what we need to do now is create a Microsoft Word file where we will paste this list of codes and the quotes into that file. And at the same time, this will be our file for this single participant. After you pasted that, ideally, I advise to color code this whole file, basically change the color of all the text in that file. Let's say green, and this color is unique to this participant. And separately, remember the second prompt, when we just asked for the codes, we'll create a separate text file. And this one, let's call it focus coding, and just paste the codes themselves into that file. And again, use the same color as you did in the file attributed to that participant. It's important that every file, every participant is unique. So different color. I think there is a limit to colors that Microsoft Word lets you choose from. So if you're facing that situation, maybe you can use different font or size or whatever, some way to indicate what this is and where these codes and quotes come from for later. And once you've done this, you're ready now to do the same thing, but for the second participant. So remember, we are on participant 1. Now you're going back to ChatGPT, given the same prompt or whatever prompts eventually worked for you, pasting that text and doing the same thing. And then after you're done, you're creating a new text file for that participant. So for the quotes and codes together. And then pasting just the list of codes, so the other prompt that you gave ChatGPT, again to the focus coding file, so where we already have the list of codes from participant 1. But remember, we're separating them by colors. It's important because later we need to be able to trace it back to which file it comes from, if we need to, for example, check the quotes for a certain code. And then we move on to another transcript. So again, we're creating initial codes and doing the same thing. So we are at the stage of initial coding now. Something I very briefly want to address here. I talk much more about it in my other videos. When do we move to stage 2, to focus coding? And as I often explain, it can either be at the very end, so you can feel free to just code initially, create initial codes for all your transcripts if you feel like you want to do it, and only then move on to focus coding stage, or we can do it after several initial transcripts. So especially if you have a little bit more, maybe more in-depth data. Sometimes it happens after 3 or 4. So basically you move on to focus coding, you do what we're about to do, and then you continue to code with the focus code. So it will depend on you and your study. But at some point you're moving to the phase of focus coding. I have this video here specifically about focus coding, so maybe watch it as well. It will kind of give you an idea of what we're trying to do at this stage. But what will happen here in our ChatGPT and Microsoft Word collaboration is that in Microsoft Word now we have all the codes, or the initial codes in that focus coding text file that we created. We have all the codes, initial codes from all the different transcripts, and we know where they come from because they have different colors. So what we're doing now is that focus coding stage where we're doing it completely manually. Like I said, you can involve ChatGPT if you wish, but to keep it right, I think it's important to do it manually. We're basically organizing these codes into groups, some sort of groups, not necessarily themes, just grouping to make sure that we can wrap our head around basically this list of random codes, to make them less random, organizing them into different groups, and moving, copying, or cutting and pasting the codes into different groups. So as a result, we have groups of codes describing some general trends and patterns, and within these groups we have different codes coming from different sources, from different data sets. Now, as you're doing that, and for example, you may get confused about some code or its content, you can't remember what it was about, you can now switch to the original source file, so the individual text file for individual participants, because you know where it comes from. Because of the color, you can quickly go there and find that code and then find the quote if you feel like you need to remind yourself what this code was about. And another thing that happens at this stage of focus coding, and again I explained that so many times in relation to different softwares that I've been using, but it's just a universal thing, is that within groups, especially if you're using ChatGPT where you created code separately for each transcript, what is likely to happen is that within these groups you may have some duplicates. So codes that were created for different participants, so they are slightly different in wording, but maybe they are about essentially the same thing. We don't need all of these. So we'll create a new description, and then we'll take all these three original codes and cut them and paste them as a comment onto that new code that we created. And again, this is so that we can trace it back. Here you still have the colors and you know where they come from, the original codes, you have these original names, so you can go back to that file and read the quote. Again, this is super important. All of it is important for that transparency and for being in full control of the process, what I said at the beginning. And now finally, once we organize and refine these codes at the focus codes coding stage, again, depending on what you did before and which stage you're in, there are a couple of different scenarios. So if you're finished with all your transcripts, because you covered all your transcripts with these initial codes, then it means you're moving on to developing themes. And if you stopped halfway through or after just a couple of transcripts and to organize the codes and create these focus codes, now you'll basically go back to ChatGPT and get similar prompts to it as you did initially, except that you'll paste the focus codes and you'll ask ChatGPT specifically to use these codes, because that's kind of the purpose, or how ideally focus coding works. You're refining the codes and then you continue, but you're more focused and slightly less deductive because you're using these codes you created for the remaining parts of the data. So it depends. If you do that, then again, at some point you're finished and you are at a point where you have everything coded, you have your focus codes, and now you're just thinking about developing themes. And theme development will, again, if we want to be completely ethical and transparent and valid and all that, I would say that it's just going to be a completely manual process. Ideally, a manual process where you're just looking at the codes and trying to find a way to, you're understanding your data, you know the answers now, and you're trying to find a way to organize these focus codes so that the themes, the topics, basically a list of topics that you're presenting to your reader, communicate what you know about the data, to make sure, as I often say, that your reader knows about your data just as much as you know about your data. So that's usually an ideally manual process. I even do it manually when I'm using NVivo, because it's so important that you understand your data and you decide what you want to communicate and how you want to communicate it. So I would not involve ChatGPT at that stage, but again, you may do it. If you decide that you want to do it, you can upload all these focus codes into NVivo, into ChatGPT, and again, just ask it At this stage, you can even tell it the research questions and say, these are focus codes. Based on all this, what can be said? How can we organize this into a list of themes and sub-themes that answer the following research questions? So that could be your prompt. But again, like I said, I do feel that preferably you should do it by yourself. So I wouldn't even involve ChatGPT at this stage. It's essentially the final go at reorganizing the codes once again to make sure that they are, like I said, telling this nice story that communicates what you want to communicate about the answers to the research questions. So this is it. I hope that you learned something new. It turned out to be quite a long video, but I hope you understand it's a long process. So it's not too bad after all. In terms of the length, I hope that you learned something from me today. If you did, please like the video, share it with others if you know others who may benefit from this instruction. Remember that you can reach out for tailored and more individual support. If you're struggling with your research, I offer a whole range of services where I can help you at all stages of research planning and implementation, including helping you use ChatGPT or any other software platform for your data analysis.